There's various jigs you can buy from companies like Mousecraft, Dowelmax, or Jessam that put several dowels in a row to kind of replace a mortise and tenon joint. But you can buy these relatively inexpensive drill bushings that you can use to make your own custom dowel jigs, and I want to try to make something like this with these. And these are fairly deep to support your drill really well, which means you need a thick piece for that to go into, so I'm going to glue some bits of wood together to make for a thicker base. And this has to be out of plywood, because if I just put a whole bunch of these in a row like that in a normal piece of wood, it would just split along the grain. And because I don't want to wait for the glue to dry, I'm just going to hot glue these two pieces together. If you heat the wood and the glue hot enough so that the glue can flow well, it can actually make for quite a strong bond. I got a bit of squeeze out with the hot glue here, so it was hot enough to flow. The bushings are made to fit into a 1/2 inch hole, and I drilled this hole with a nice brad point bit, and it fits in there, but I think far too easily. So I drilled this hole with just a regular bit like this, and that is actually much tighter. And that's the sort of fit I want, so that the bushing stays in there on its own. And gluing this was more work than just using wood glue, but it's cooled down enough now that I can just use it. To place 5 of these bushings in here precisely, I need to drill the holes precisely. And for that, I'm going to make some kind of a drill guide out of this piece of hardwood. I'm starting this hole with the brad point bit because I know it'll start more precisely, but then switching to the metal drill bit because I know that drills a slightly smaller hole. And I like to rotate the workpiece 180 degrees from time to time, so that way any inaccuracies in the drill press kind of cancel out. And it's kind of neat, I can actually see where I drilled with a brad point bit. This part is bigger than the rest of the hole. Now to position this piece consistently this way, I'm just going to screw a scrap of plywood on here to use as a stop against this side here. That takes care of fixing it this way, and for going this way, I could just measure the distance here with a set of calipers. So I set this to 10 millimeters and locked it, and now I can just line it up like this and lock it in place. And let's check that again. That's still good. And now I can drill that first hole carefully. And with my caliper set to 30 millimeters and locked, I can just position the next hole here. And now the hole at the 50 millimeter position. So I've been careful to always hit a new spot on the backer board so that I don't get tear out on the back of this plywood. And now it's time to press the bushings. I like to relieve the pressure a few times during pressing, because that way if I start it crooked, the friction with the vise won't maintain that crookedness, so it can straighten itself out a little bit better. Well, let's see how I did with lateral placement, just going against here with the calipers, and that is pretty good, but in terms of spacing this way, they're not as consistent. And now just checking that we're parallel to the fence I just added. Looks good. So there's my 3/8 inch drill, and if I go through the bushing like that, I'm going quite deep still, so I want to restrict the depth, so I'm just going to use this wooden bushing, and that's a good depth to use. And those line up pretty good. And it's not that the jig just lines up with itself, because these holes were drilled this way and these holes were drilled this way. So for instance, if this one was off this way, it wouldn't line up with the corresponding error in the other piece. I see a little bit of a gap here, so let's try squeezing that together. And that's a flush joint. And I can't let you rub your fingers across it, but if I rub this across, you don't hear it going across a step, whereas if I hold a piece of cardstock on here and rub across that, there's definitely a step there. And looking at it against a light like this, I don't see a step this way, and if I flip it around, I still don't see a step. So that is very flush. And I spaced these a little bit further apart so that there's actually room for another dowel between one set of dowels. So imagine if this was a table leg, the dowels from one side and the other side would actually kind of crisscross each other to make for more reinforcement so this doesn't split. Although you want to put the dowels in on one side before drilling the holes on the other side, because the holes kind of cut into each other a little bit. Of course, most of the time I don't want to make these joints flush, but that's easy enough to adjust for, because I can just put a spacer right here to get closer to the edge, or put the spacer in between the fence and the body of the jig to get further from the edge. And if I want to put these flat on the surface, I just take this fence away and I just clamp it to the board, and I use this side here to make sure I got it square, and I've got an extension here so I have a place to clamp it onto a board. And I just want to re-emphasize, I specified these bushings to be nice and deep to provide really good guidance for the drill. They're also hardened, because with a lot of dowel jigs that you can buy, they come with these short little bushings, and that makes for a fair bit of play with the drill. And also, with such a short bushing, there's a lot more leverage on there, which makes for more pressure on the bushing, which causes increased wear and tear on the drill and the bushing. The jigs that do have deep enough bushings are the Craig pocket hole jig, because as the drill enters the wood at an angle, there's a lot of sideways load, so they knew they needed a big bushing for that. Also, this self-centering dowel jig with its nice deep bushings, although this one would be much more useful to me if it had 4 of these same size bushings instead of these large ones there, because I always end up repositioning it if I want to use more than 2 dowels for a joint. And also the dowel max, but that one costs 7 times as much as a set of these bushings, and I've only used 5 of these, so I've got 7 left. And I just realized Craig also makes a doweling jig with 5-in line, but with short bushings. It's like, guys, you had it right with a pocket hole jig, and now you don't. But you don't have to buy any of these jigs, because you can buy these bushings on Amazon and make a doweling jig the way you like it. See links in the video description.